People united will never be defeated.
Iced out. USC students, community organizers, local leaders say they don't want ICE in South Carolina. Well, they're here. Well, they're fighting all the way to the State House as they eye immigration enforcement in the state of Minnesota.
There's not a better place in this whole country. There's not a better place in this whole world to live, work, and raise a family.
The State of the State, in his final address, South Carolina's governor's longest-serving governor says the state is ready for the next chapter. Why some say after 2 decades of Republican rule, that chapter should not be the GOP.
I think that it's going to help people step back a second and really focus on the founding of our nation and the Ten Commandments being a bedrock upon which our nation and our legal system was built.
I think the chances around here are pretty high that it's going to pass because people buy into the frivolous and the meaningless.
A clash over the commandments at the State House. A proposal up for debate would require the 10 commandments in every public school classroom. Opponents say some lawmakers are wasting people's time.
It is officially another Sunday in South Carolina. I'm Brian McConkey in the capital of South Carolina.
I'm Catherine Glenn Foster here from D.C.
And I'm Dave Wilson, and Connect to the Capitol starts right now.
What do we want? Justice. When do we want it? Now. If we don't get it, shut it down. If we don't get it, shut it down. If we don't get it, shut it down.
I hope that we're able to make an active change and to stop the violence and stop the deaths. Most importantly, I think it's important to educate people, and I think it's important to talk to both sides. I think that a lot of people view this as a partisan issue when really I think it's a human rights issue.
USC students part of what is becoming a national movement, and ICE out, they're calling it. Students and local activists organizing several days of protest this past week in Columbia, supporting immigrant families in the state and condemning the actions of federal agents after 2 deadly shootings in Minnesota. That is where this student-led movement was born, in fact, and that is where we begin on this Sunday morning. Brian McConkey again here in Columbia. Dave Wilson, Catherine Gunn Foster in the nation's capital. All right. We see what's been going on here all over the country, but also here locally. A lot of organizing been going on. They took this fight to the State House and rallied there on Friday. What can even state-level lawmakers do here? Let's talk about immigration enforcement.
Sure, immigration is, of course, a federal issue, but there is so much that can be done at the state level. This includes, obviously, passing laws. It includes how the state-level officials are willing to work with the federal government, how they're willing to stand up to the federal government. But even more than that, perhaps, is exactly what's happening at the State House. What happened this past Friday, for example, when folks all across the nation said, okay, we're going to take a day at a minimum and start there, not put our dollars into an economy that's feeding a federal government that is attacking not only undocumented immigrants, but, as we've repeatedly seen, U.S. citizens as well.
This boils down to a First Amendment issue. We're here in the nation's capital, and where we talk about issues about rights. We talk about human rights. We talk about the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, and all of these things. And it has been a civics lesson more than anything as we have taken a look over the tragic shooting of a man in Minnesota. There are a lot of conflicting stories. There were ways that information was coming out from the Department of Homeland Security. There's footage that showed something very different than what they were saying. And it has left a pall over a lot of people in America who are saying, can I trust my government? Can I trust what they're saying to me? And let's go back to the same First Amendment right that we have of the freedom of the press, the freedom of speech. This is a moment of the redress of grievances. And I don't know from a constitutional lawyer standpoint how that plays itself out.
So in this moment, people are almost at a loss of what to do. They're trying to organize, they're trying to speak out, they're trying to make their voice heard. We have amendments for a reason. Our Bill of Rights is there to protect every American. And we can have a legitimate debate over how to enforce immigration, how immigration should be set up and handled and enforced. And that's a conversation that we can have in the halls of power here in DC. We can have it in our nation's restaurants, in businesses, around the kitchen table. This is exactly where we need to be talking through these issues and coming up with real policy solutions. But at this point, we've kind of thrown all that to the wayside. We're disregarding not only the First Amendment, but also the Second and on down the line. There aren't many amendments at this point in our Bill of Rights that are continuing to be properly upheld through this ICE these ICE maneuvers. And so it's deeply concerning, and community action, community organizing, and rallies are one of the most powerful ways that we as Americans, from the time of the Revolutionary War all the way through to today, are able to make our voices heard.
It's that peaceable ability to protest. It's a rally. How do we come together and say collectively, I see something from this standpoint, somebody else can see something from this standpoint, and as part of America, we have the ability to have conflicting viewpoints but still be Americans and do it civilly, not at a place where we turn around and have absolute discord. And unfortunately, it has led to some people losing their lives over this, and that's a very tragic part of this.
While stepping in to protect a woman who had just been attacked, blowing a whistle. And so by rallying, the people are able to demonstrate their will and hopefully make the changes that we need to see in those halls of power, the changes in law and policy that will make a difference back on the streets of America.
Speaking of law and power and change of government, Henry McMaster had his last State of the State address. We will take a look and give you a rundown on what he said and didn't say and what it could mean for the coming legislative session's final few weeks when we come back.
Who must take responsibility and act. We need leaders. We need leaders. We have leaders in this room.
22 years of single-party rule. If they truly cared about you, they would have done something already. If they truly cared about you, they would have fixed public education. If they truly cared about you, they would have fixed the roads.
Governor Henry McMaster on Wednesday laying out his final statement as governor of South Carolina, his final State of the State address. What followed that was the Democratic response by Representative Jermaine Johnson out of Richland County. He's considered to be one of the front runners for the gubernatorial nomination for the Democratic Party. He's been saying all along, I've learned how to cross the aisle. We've had him here on the show. We've learned how to cross the aisle and sit down with other people. But the rhetoric changed as he gave the response from the Democrats saying, listen, it's been 22 years of Republican rule, ironically 10 of those being Henry McMaster, and so it's time for a change. While the governor's saying, be prepared because he's getting ready to walk out the door.
Governor McMaster's State of the State was a victory lap for him. But as Representative Johnson pointed out, it's 10 years of Governor McMaster, 22 years of Republican rule, and recently a supermajority. And what has that brought the state? Are the roads fixed? Are our classrooms where they should be? Is the affordability in our state where it needs to be? And are communities statewide all rising at the same rate? There are real questions to be raised there when some schools are getting, bright, shiny new classrooms and buildings and everything that they need, and other schools don't even have a track to run on.
Exactly.
Yeah, we heard a lot of familiar themes, I think, in that State of the State address. As you said, a bit of a victory lap. The governor talking about his continued commitment to education. That's a good thing. We're increasing those teachers' salaries again, and it's ahead schedule. He made sure to note in his address that, hey, if lawmakers do what he's asking, we're going to be ahead of Georgia and North Carolina, and we're going to keep our teachers at home. That's the good stuff right there, for sure. But when it comes to some of the things Johnson's talking about, there needs to be some more action, some more equity, I guess we can say.
And that's an important factor to realize, because we are going to be looking at a generational shift happening in the State House. If you're ever at the State House, if you hang out there like we do and try to give you the inside viewpoint on what's going on, there has been a generational shift that's happened in the lobby. It's happening in the legislature. And at nearly 80 years old, Henry McMaster is going to be leaving as a almost 10-year governor of South Carolina, the longest-serving governor in state history, which he will wear with pride. But he's talking about his legacy as he's getting ready to go. But we are going to be seeing a very different generation of leadership starting to come to the fold here, I think.
And Governor McMaster has accomplished so much, and no one can deny that. But Representative Johnson's points are valid. They're well made. And so I think this new generation that comes in, generations that are very committed to transparency, to equality, to ensuring that everyone has that fair shot, that's going to be very important going forward, no matter who ends up in the governor's mansion.
Right, and that's where you take a look at their new caucuses of groups of lawmakers that come together. That's the caucus idea here. One's called the Future Caucus, where you've got Representative Brand Newton out of Lancaster and Senator Dion Tedder out of Charleston County. The up-and-comers are beginning to take that step of a leadership role, and I think that that's an important thing for South Carolina. As you start looking at our gubernatorial race and the other races that are coming up, that's one of the important things to keep in mind.
And it's bipartisan and bicameral.
Yeah. Speaking of those races, coming up, we have an interview that we did a couple days ago with one of our Attorney General candidates, David Stumbo, 8th Circuit solicitor out of the upstate. He's in the studio, and we come back. All right, welcome back to Connect to the Capitol on this Sunday morning. As promised, we are talking about some of the statewide races that'll be going on here in 2026, and you know what offices are open. One of them is the Attorney General's office, with the current AG running for Governor, Alan Wilson. Joining us now is David Stumbo, Republican candidate for Attorney General, currently the 8th Circuit solicitor.
That's correct.
In the Greenwood area, but certainly no stranger to the central part of the state. You worked in the AG's office, probably a lifetime ago, though.
That's right. Well, it's good to be, it's kind of my second home, Columbia. My wife and I were here for 12 years, worked at the Attorney General's office. I went to law school here, worked at the solicitor's office in Lexington. Our 4 children were all born here, so coming back to Columbia feels like home just as much as Greenwood, which is where I grew up, and now we live up there. So.
Right. First time this office has been wide open for quite some time.
Right.
Much like the governor's office will be wide open for the first time in quite some time. What was it that kind of was the tipping point for you to say it's time for me to take another step to statewide?
Well, I've been a prosecutor for over 2 decades, Brian, and so working with law enforcement and fighting crime is just part of who we are and keeping families safe in our state. And so knowing that the office was coming open with Attorney General Wilson deciding he's going to run for governor, my wife and I prayed about it and really believed that the timing was right. Certainly not running away from my current job, which I think is the best job in the world. I think circuit solicitor, if you're a courtroom prosecutor and like to work with crime victims and law enforcement, it's the best job I can imagine. But to be at the tip of the spear of the criminal justice system for our state, that's what the AG is constitutionally. That's your chief prosecutor. We believe, my career lends itself to me being in this role, and we're really excited to tell the voters all over the state who I am and what I'm about and what we plan to do if I get elected Attorney General.
Now, I remember when you made your announcement, it was September, I believe.
That's correct.
If I'm right.
Yep.
And I remember you said you are the only true conservative Republican candidate.
Right.
What do you think sets you apart from the others that are currently declared?
Here's the 2 things that I think are very important in this race is, one, that you have experience as a prosecutor. And, we have over 15 sheriffs already endorsing us in this race and a number of solicitors around the state. So we have over 20 law enforcement leaders endorsing me, and I think there's a reason for that. They've seen the work I've done in the courtroom. So keeping families safe and being an experienced prosecutor is a big part of that, Brian. But the second part is, is having the worldview that's necessary, I think, as a conservative to go into court on policy matters and fight for conservative principles. And I've been a conservative Republican my whole life. My wife and I have worked in the pro-life industry, so we fought for the rights of the unborn and fought for conservative principles like election integrity and parental rights, Second Amendment rights. All of those are things that I've stood firm on over the years in our principles. And so when we're fighting policy battles, that's the other job of the AG. One's to be a crime fighter. The second is to defend our laws that are passed by our legislature and make sure conservative principles, that we fight for those in our courtrooms, that we fight against federal overreach when Washington is overbearing our state and our citizens and affecting our quality of life in South Carolina on any number of issues. That the Attorney General is in a position to go to court and make sure that we maintain a conservative state. We're a red state, and we should stay that way. And that we maintain our quality of life in South Carolina.
I know you mentioned some of the platform issues here. Support for law enforcement, support for conservative ideals. I know health care is another one of yours that you're true to. Just this week, we've had a lot of rallies from USC students, people at the State House, when it comes to law enforcement, the immigration enforcement that's going on all over the country.
Right.
But in light of the most recent incident in Minneapolis, we've had a lot of students just rallying, and other members of the public as well.
Right.
When it comes to that, I know you're a supporter of immigration enforcement. How do we walk this line?
Well, I do think on the state and local level, we need to support what the federal authorities are doing. We don't need to stand in their way. Ultimately, we have immigration laws here. Could our immigration laws be improved on? Certainly. And that's something Congress, I think, is going to need to address in the coming years. But the laws are as they stand now, they need to be enforced. When the federal government comes in to enforce immigration policy, and if there's those that are here illegally, that are many of which are committing crimes in our country, and we're dealing with that issue, we have to enforce the immigration laws. So on the state and local level, we need to support those efforts. Now, a lot of the failures I think that we've seen in Minnesota have come from the state and local authorities standing down. And so you have these confrontations between the federal agents, ICE agents, and the crowds of people that are protesting, Brian. And I think the problem is when you have violent protests that are not peaceful, and there are plenty of peaceful protesters, I'm sure, there too, but there's others that are committing violent acts. The state and local guys really need to be able to step in and make arrests and charge people with disorderly conduct and control those situations. And because they failed to do so, Brian, I think that's where we've seen these confrontations between the federal agents and the protesters without any help from the state and locals. That's never going to happen, I don't believe, in South Carolina, because we have great state and local law enforcement here. We have great prosecutors that are going to do the right things when it comes to protest. If people want to protest, they have the First Amendment right to do so, and as long as they're peaceful. But I've told our law enforcement guys when we've had protests and marches in our circuit, look, go out and make sure the crowd knows that they have the First Amendment right to say their piece. But the first person that picks up something and throws it at a citizen or a law enforcement officer, the first person that violently confronts someone, you have to nip that in the bud very quickly, Brian. And I think that has not happened in Minnesota. That's why things have gotten out of control there. The state and local guys, I believe here, and this is the kind of Attorney General I want to be, to lead our local law enforcement agencies to be strong and decisive so we can keep the peace and make sure that we're enforcing the law. So that's the failures I think we're seeing in Minnesota right now, and it comes from a failure of the state and local officials in Minnesota to control the situation.
Last question, we'll touch on that health care issue.
Yeah.
If elected to the AG's office, we know the health care disparities in this state. There are a lot of sick people. Some people don't have access to things. From the AG's office, how can you help improve matters like that in terms of maybe enforcing policy or even getting involved in efforts in others, nationwide to improve that?
Sure. I think what you have to do is make sure we're meeting with all the stakeholders, and that would be consumer advocates and also the businesses, the hospitals, the doctors. I had a conversation with a good friend of mine who is an emergency room doctor by trade, but he currently is the CEO of our hospital system in Greenwood, Self. And he and I had a really good conversation about the challenges that they're having right now in Greenwood. And it's one of the last nonprofit hospital systems in the state up at Self Regional in our town of Greenwood. And we have to have conversations, Brian. That's the bottom line. If we don't have conversations with each other and make sure that all the issues are being put on the table, not only from the doctors and the hospitals' perspective, but from the patients and the consumers, and making sure that we have access to health care for all our citizens in South Carolina and that we don't impede that. I think that's a huge issue that we're going to be facing as time goes on, because the costs have gone up so significantly. And that is something that we're going to have to wrestle with over the next few years. As Attorney General, I'm going to be able to weigh in on a lot of the court cases dealing with health care issues. And we're always going to advocate for the best for the citizens. That's going to be the bottom line for me as Attorney General. What is in the best interest of our citizens in South Carolina on any given issue, not just health care. And so I look forward to working with all the stakeholders and the General Assembly and the Governor's office to make sure that we have good policy on health care in South Carolina.
All right, thank you, sir. Appreciate you coming in.
Yep, you bet. Thank you, Brian. Appreciate it.
I'm sure you'll be back.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
David Stumbo, Republican candidate for Attorney General. Much more when we come back on Connect to the Capitol.
I think that it's going to help people step back a second and really focus on the founding of our nation and the Ten Commandments being a bedrock upon which our nation and our legal system was built.
I think the chances around here are pretty high that it's going to pass because people buy into the frivolous and the meaningless.
A proposal at the State House would require the Ten Commandments to be displayed in every public school classroom in South Carolina. That includes public colleges and universities. Supporters say it's about recognizing this country's beginnings, while opponents say spending time on something like this is useless and might not stand up in court. Well,
you might know something about things standing up in court.
She might.
Constitutional lawyer.
Yeah, as a constitutional lawyer, there is no might not stand up in court. It will not stand up in court. And as we said, it really would be a waste of taxpayer time. There is a U.S. Supreme Court case from out of Kentucky back in 1980, Stone v. Graham, in which the state tried to do something quite similar to this, actually at least using private funds to post the Ten Commandments in every classroom, not even using public funds, which this could entail. And the court said absolutely not. Even with private funds being used, there is no secular legislative purpose to insist on posting this, and shut it down. And this has happened time and time again since. In the last couple of years, we've seen some states try to start this back up, and to date, we have not seen those states have success.
Well, like many things we've seen in recent years, they end up in court. And as you said, this is going to be one of them, and it will not survive.
It will not.
And it really concerns me, and having come from a social conservative background, and a lot of folks in South Carolina, you go to church on Sunday, you got folks going to church on Sunday and Wednesday and Tuesday and every other day of the week, and that's great. It is a core part of our community. It's part of the fabric of the state. But at the same time, lawmakers going into a legislative session where we've got to deal with roads, bridges, education funding, getting a budget passed, what are we going to be doing on so many other different issues? Really, is this a place that we need to be focused on right now?
And communities are able to elect to make that a core part of the community. Really, individuals are able to elect that. Even a community can't impose that. But there are many other religions and non-religion out there. And to say that this must be part of the core fabric of a community would be deeply concerning.
Yeah. We have a lot more that we're going to be able to cover for you next week as we connect you to the Capitol. It's great to be here. We're here in D.C. Brian?
Maybe. I'd love to have you back here in Columbia, but of course, we just love having you here via satellite. So we'll take you however we can get.
The snow's already up to here. So.
Yeah, well, we're not quite there, but we're going to thaw out over the next week, and we will see you next Sunday.